Well, throughout several days, we've focused on Baltimore City schools as they've been sweeping education under the carpet and doing what they needed to do to make things right. It's by Fox 45 titled Project Baltimore. So we continue our series, Crisis in Our Classrooms. There is a bunch of crises going on in classrooms, and it all begins with low performance students earning over a 1.0 earning at a 1.0 GPA, which is below. In Baltimore City, it's 41% of these schools. So what's going on? Here's Chris Paps.
Big take.
When Giovanni Patterson ran for Baltimore City Council president last year,
Yet, despite the amount of money they get, we don't see much change.
he ran on a platform that included accountability and education.
Our schools outspend 97% of other major school districts.
And when Project Baltimore showed him how Baltimore City students have been doing this year,
This is terrible.
here is how he reacted.
This is just further perpetuating the cycle of poverty, blight, despair.
This chart was assembled by Baltimore City Schools and obtained by Project Baltimore. It shows the average GPA for every high school grade in the city, freshman through senior. In the first 3 quarters of this past school year, according to the chart, 41% of all Baltimore City high school students earned below a 1.0 grade point average. In other words, nearly half of the roughly 20,600 public high school students in Baltimore earned less than a D average.
It's heartbreaking. If almost half of our kids are failing, what options do they have after high school? This is really disheartening. And it's sad to see this, man.
On the other end of this chart, 21% of city high school students earned a GPA of 3.0 or better, a B average. About half as many who earned below a D. We can also see the district lost more than 700 high school students during the first 3 quarters of this year. In January, City School CEO Dr. Sonia Santelises first sounded the alarm, saying the course failure rate for students had nearly doubled during the COVID shutdowns. A few months later in May, North Avenue announced students would not be held back for failing classes. This most recent GPA data could show us why North Avenue made that decision. During the second quarter of the 2019-2020 school year, just before COVID hit, 24% of high school students had a GPA below 1. Now, it's 41%. City schools declined an interview, but told us in a statement the COVID-19 pandemic created significant disruptions to student learning. Starting this summer and beyond, City Schools is providing students with a variety of opportunities to acquire the unfinished learning they lost.
It's not gone. It's not going anywhere.
City Council President Nick Mosby, who defeated Patterson in the election, is reportedly under investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice concerning campaign finances, business, and tax records. Project Baltimore emailed and called Mosby's office, requesting an interview to discuss these numbers concerning student GPAs. We never heard back.
These people don't care, man. It's they come from the same environment. You know, Nick Mosby is a product of Baltimore City Schools. Brandon Scott's a product of Baltimore City Schools, and they see what's going on. But then when you bring this to them, they don't care. They don't care at all. You have to raise the standard. Everyone should be speaking out about this.
Project Baltimore reached out to the other school systems in our area requesting their GPA data. We were told by all of them that it's not readily available. I'm Chris Pabst, and this is Project Baltimore.
And it's just like this. They don't care. They just don't care. You need to start caring, because really, if your kids, this happened to your child, you want to be dropping out of school because, well, this, that, and the third. But there's probably more to the Baltimore education system that meets the eyes. We continue our crisis in our classrooms. But all I have to say here is this, education is very important. It's very important that you get a high school diploma, because if you don't get your diploma, if you don't get your diploma, then in the near future you're not going to get a good job. If you don't graduate, you'll be higher odds living in poverty, and you won't get a full-time job. Now kids these days, they're working because their mom and dad are struggling with the bills, and it's like, okay, but your education always comes first. You can't be sitting on a school night because, you got to help out with the bills. Because I get that your mom and dad are helping out. Listen, I get that your mom and dad need help with the bills, but your education must come first. And if you don't get your diploma, you won't be able to get that good raise, and you won't be able to find a good job without a high school diploma. Everywhere you work, they'll just sit there and understand and make exceptions. So try to understand what's going on. Still ahead, The Failure Factory, a documentary all about the failure of the Baltimore City schools. And coming up, 4,600 Baltimore EM students promoted after missing 60 days or more. Could you ever imagine missing 60 days and then getting promoted? Why was that? Stay with us. Could you ever imagine being promoted after you failed your grade? According to 4,600 people. If you're one of the 4,600 people in the Baltimore City area, you might have been promoted after missing 60 school days. Truancy. Would you be truant and then be promoted at the same time? That's a violation of your state law. If they're being truant, you need to find ways to combat them. There's truancy court. Nobody actually cares. They just want to, the no child left behind thing, Send them on up. Get them out of here. We don't care. That's exactly what's happening. And as you're about to see, there are alarming numbers coming out of the Baltimore City concerning students passing classes while missing months of school. Why is that? Once again, Chris Paps.
Numbers alarming?
Absolutely, they're alarming.
Hetty? Are these numbers alarming?
Absolutely, they're alarming.
Hetty Chang is with Attendance Works, a national nonprofit devoted to understanding how school attendance affects student learning.
Attendance is crucial to a child's social well-being, health, and academic achievement.
In Maryland, schools are required by law to have 180 instructional days in a school year. If a student misses 18 of those days, or 10%, that student is considered
truancy
absent, which Chang says puts students at risk of falling behind, not being able to catch up, and dropping out.
But it's more than that, because school is also where we connect with peers, where we gain those habits of success, like showing up when things are tough, that allow us to do well when we eventually are in the workforce.
Despite the importance of being in class, Baltimore City Schools does not have an attendance requirement in order for students to pass a grade level or graduate. Historically, the district has had the highest rates of chronic absenteeism in Maryland. But now, data obtained by Project Baltimore is showing just how many school days some students are missing. The data are not released publicly. Fox 45 obtained it after filing a motion to intervene in a civil lawsuit against Baltimore City Schools, filed by Baltimore resident Giovanni Patterson. We can see within the data, during the 21-22 school year, more than 4,800 elementary and middle school students missed 60 school days or more. Yet, nearly 97% of those students were promoted to the next grade. The following year, a similar story. More than 3,300 elementary and middle school students missed 60 school days or more, and 98% were promoted. District-wide, that same year, more than 3,500 students missed 90 school days or more, with many of them still being promoted.
I think it's incredibly hard for a kid who's missing 60 or 90 days of school to get a proper education.
And then there's this. In the 2021-2022 school year, 369 students district-wide missed 170 school days or more. Yet 91 of those students were promoted to the next grade. Think about that. 91 students were promoted after missing 170 school days or more. That same year, North Avenue approved a $1.4 billion budget for around 77,000 students. That comes out to just about $18,000 per student, meaning taxpayers gave city schools more than $6.5 million to educate those 369 students who missed 170 school days or more. Those students did not get a proper education. Project Baltimore, last Tuesday on November 5th, emailed each member of the Baltimore City School Board asking, how are you working to address this data on behalf of parents, students, the public, and taxpayers? If a student misses 170 days of school, should taxpayers be refunded? And should some attendance be required for a student to be promoted? We were told in an email on Sunday that we would get a response on behalf of the board, but the district did not provide one.
School is where kids connect to other kids.
Chang told Fox 45 News, if a student, for whatever reason, misses 60 or 90 instructional days, it could take years of individualized attention to catch that student up.
We shouldn't underestimate how challenging that is for a school district, how challenging that is for teachers.
Especially when it's thousands of students missing significant amounts of class time. Because remember, a student is considered chronically absent and therefore academically at risk when they miss just 10% of school.
When you're talking 60 or 90 days, you're at 20%, you're at 40%, 50%. It's going to be extremely hard for those kids, if not impossible.
Within the data we obtained from the lawsuit, we can see individual school level numbers, the amount of class students are missing at elementary, middle, and high schools. And those numbers may be even more alarming. That part of the story Wednesday. I'm Chris Pabst, and this is Project Baltimore. I'm Chris Pabst. Thanks for watching. Here's another...
We'll have that part for you come up on Wednesday. But here's the thing. There's one word to describe this. Truancy. Truancy is when you have 7 or more days that are unexcused. And I want to imagine a lot of people commenting on this saying, stop more disparity. Fox cares nothing about this. Twisting your tax issue is their go-to move. It's not about, it's about getting facts. Things that you need to understand. Truancy. It's a big issue in every state, county, community, city you live in. Iowa takes truancy very seriously. California takes it very seriously as well. When your child is truant, like we talked about, you're missing a lot of school. It's peer pressure, gang activity, bullying. If you don't combat this, all you're going to be is at the end zone saying, we don't know what to do. Nobody knows about all the truancy laws in the state has. So reminder, that one word, truancy, remember that. Because that's 7 or more, because that's over 7 unexcused days for school. And even then, you wouldn't know. Coming up, Project Failure. And before we go on right here, this part of the story that he talked about,
and those numbers may be even more alarming. That part of the story Wednesday. I'm Chris Pabst, and this is Project Baltimore.
That part of the story come up on a Wednesday. Come up on Wednesday, and we'll let you know, and we'll have that for you then. Coming up, Project Failure. Why are kids failing classes when really it's all the school's fault? Why is it a failure factory when it came down to what went on? What's going to happen now? Chris Patson is back with that Project Failure story documentary. Please stay with us. Throughout the past several days, we looked in the Baltimore City schools as they're failing our kids and not caring about their children's education by spending a lot of our tax dollars up the ass. So with that in mind, it's a failure factory. Why is Baltimore schools not stepping up to the plate and just washing their hands saying, I don't care? Because the more you sweep things under the carpet, the more lumpy it's going to get. I mean, it's like you cover it up, you sweep it on the rug, you don't care. I mean, you don't pick, it's what school districts do. Just pick stuff out of the apple tree, and then they just call it a day. Which it is not. It is not. And if that ever happened to your child, well, we wouldn't even be here right now, would we? We would not even be here. And if we were here talking about this, we wouldn't even be calling this Project Baltimore. If it happened here in this district, I would certainly want to cross the line. But it isn't. Happens Baltimore City. And we've been showing you some examples. Probably some common sense. So why is the Baltimore City School District not doing enough to educate to educate its children? Again, Chris Papps.
It's killing the lives of thousands of black kids.
Not a 1.3 people, a 0.13.
The school system messed up.
Big time. Big time. Failed him. Big time. Big time.
City schools denied our requests and gave us nothing. So we sued.
I want to take this opportunity to apologize to those students and families who may have been affected.
Dr. Stanley, she's failing our children. She's failing them.
Educators consider him a ghost student.
This is a tragedy for taxpayers, but also the community.
How did my son pass if he didn't know none of this math?
Was action taken? Regardless, action was taken. More actions are to come.
You have 5 dead students enrolled at your school.
Do you agree with those calls to see the city school CEO resign, and do you think it's time for a change?
It's worse than anything I've heard in the whole time that I've been governor.
You cannot ask the school CEOs questions, but if you can send it, so, ma'am, that's the process.
I don't want to bury my children in the streets of Baltimore. I don't want them killed in the streets of Baltimore.
What about the failure factory that Augusta Fell Savage became?
My name is Chris Papst. I'm a reporter for Fox 45 News Project Baltimore, a team of journalists investigating Maryland's public schools. This unit is really the first of its kind in this city dedicated to looking into issues in the public school system. And we've been doing this for nearly 5 years with the help of parents, teachers, students, taxpayers who want change. We've produced hundreds of reports uncovering some very troubling issues in Baltimore City public schools: grade fixing scandals, violence against teachers, students who are graduating despite failing the courses. We have yet to uncover the full scope of the corruption, but a watershed moment came in March of 2021 when we made a startling discovery. A discovery that really showed how deeply the issues go in Baltimore City schools and how those issues have affected generations of people in the community. Meanwhile, many of our elected leaders stand by and just watch this happen without answering our questions. The school board members and the school CEO for years have refused to sit down and speak with us directly about our findings. Many people in Baltimore tell us their voices are never heard. Hopefully this documentary can serve as a reminder that somebody is listening and there is a platform for you to tell your story. Serious allegations at a West Baltimore high school.
What about the kids? What about that failure factory that Augusta Fell Savage became?
A scheme to change grades and inflate enrollment numbers. First exposed by Project Baltimore, and 6 months later, confirmed by City Schools' own investigator.
That's astonishing, absolutely astonishing. What are they? This school needs to be shut down.
The internal investigation would show the problem was even worse than we first reported. Administrators at Augusta Fells had improperly changed grades and put students in classes that weren't even offered.
He didn't fail, the school failed him.
Project Baltimore first discovered grading irregularities at Augusta Fells in March 2021 when we spoke with Tiffany France. Her son passed just 3 classes in 4 years, but was still being promoted through the course levels. With a 0.13 grade point average, he ranked 62 out of 120 in his class.
Where do I turn? Where do I go? Who helps my son? What happens from here?
The report also found students were scheduled in classes that were not offered.
The ghost students were attending ghost classes. The classes didn't exist.
Ghost students, as they're known by educators, can be used to inflate enrollment numbers and increase the tax dollars a school receives at more than $15,000 per student. Baltimore City Schools is the 5th most funded large school system in the country. Project Baltimore in April spoke with a former student who told us he wasn't in the school because he was in jail.
From August up until December.
So from August to December of 2019, you were incarcerated?
Yes, as I can see in the transcripts. Yeah, I'm basically a ghost student, but I didn't enroll in the class or anything. I've been gone since 2017, buddy.
This man's name appeared on a list of 21 seniors enrolled but not attending. And it turns out the problem is even bigger than what we first reported. City Schools identified 100 students with questionable enrollment status at just this one high school. There are 37 other Baltimore City high schools, and when all the ghost students are accounted for, it could be millions of dollars owed back to taxpayers. And the question remains, will anyone face criminal charges?
It certainly sounds like fraud. If somebody is keeping them on the rolls, that's fraudulent. That's theft of taxpayers' money. That's a crime.
While outside agencies continue their investigation, 4 people have been implicated in the scheme. 3 no longer work for city schools, including the principal, Tracy Hicks, and the assistant principal, Joy Wasiga.
So if the only thing that we have left is bringing people into a courtroom in handcuffs, to answer for their actions, that's if the evidence dictates it, that's certainly something that would be appropriate.
The district has assured parents Augusta Fells is now under the guidance of an experienced and transformational principal, Kamala Carnes. But we found Carnes also has a questionable past.
No comment. You don't even know what my questions are. How can you say no comment?
Carnes has been the focus of 2 internal investigations by city schools. One in 2017 as principal of Claremont Middle High, where she was found to have mismanaged a student's activity fund. The other in 2019, when Project Baltimore reported on allegations of grade changing at Joseph C. Briscoe Academy. An internal investigation ultimately cleared Principal Carnes in the Briscoe case, but the report was inconclusive as to whether improper grade changing was happening at the school. And when the report came out, Carnes was already at Augusta Fells. After the stunning findings at Augusta Fells, Baltimore City School Board refused to speak with Project Baltimore, which we expected. It's been years since anyone from the school board has agreed to an interview with us. Instead, Baltimore City Schools CEO Dr. Sonia Santelises released a statement. The breach of trust by those former employees cannot be overstated. We are disappointed those adults would place their selfish motives above the well-being of students. While our systems worked to uncover the scheme, we also learned lessons that will lessen the chance this can happen again. But for 6 months prior to releasing its initial findings, the district tried to downplay what was happening in Augusta Fells. And the community was really reaching a breaking point. We hear from former Baltimore City students all the time who tell us that the school system just didn't give them the education that they need to support a family or even to support themselves. And we're seeing the fallout from that after generations in what's happening in Baltimore. The population is shrinking, crime is rising, but throughout all of this, it just doesn't seem like the leaders in Baltimore City, the elected leaders, want to take responsibility for what's happening in the school system.
The children in high school have elementary education. Enough is enough.
We're gonna bring the revolution. Come hell or high water.
Several community groups called for the city school CEO to resign. They threatened a class action lawsuit claiming city schools failed to educate generations of students. Their case in point, Augusta Fells.
Somebody has to be accountable for that. Somebody has to put the checks and balances in place. And I don't think that Dr. Sonia Santelises has done a thorough job in vetting out any corruption that, directly affects our children.
Baltimore City Mayor Brandon Scott appoints the school board. Fox 45 News asked Mayor Scott if the city's school CEO should resign.
This is much deeper than one person. We know that across the country, we have seen issues like this. The system has a plan for how we're going to work with our young people, and we're going to focus on that and focus on helping our young people and not using them for political fodder.
At this point, outrage was growing in the community. Fox 45 News conducted nearly 20 unscientific polls about this investigation alone. Mackenzie Frost joins us now with reaction from the community, which was really overwhelming.
Absolutely, Chris. When we asked our viewers about City Schools CEO Sonia Santelises, more than 90% of them who took the poll said she should be forced to answer for these failing students and the lack of education happening inside the classroom. When it comes to City Council doing its job of holding her accountable, 97% of people say council members elected to serve their constituents in their district are not holding Santelises accountable for these ghost students, poor performance, and grade-changing schemes. And remember, Chris, the City Council does approve the district's budget, so they do have some level of accountability and responsibility here. And I've sent more than 99 different questions to the City Council members asking all about the Augusta Fells investigation, including, is this happening in other schools? Should leadership be held accountable, and should that leadership be changed at the district level? Should criminal charges be filed based on what we found out in this internal investigation? Most of those questions have gone unanswered to this day. And remember, Chris, Mayor Brandon Scott also plays a role in this. They approve the district's budget. Mayor Brandon Scott also has the authority to appoint the members of the Board of Commissioners, who then have the authority to hire and fire the school CEO.
Fox 45 News hosted 9 town halls over the summer to discuss serious concerns in the city, including education. The city's elected leaders refused to participate.
Where do we go from here? Because we cannot have the same conversation, and children are being failed. And for any politician that's hearing this, parents have stepped up, parents have showed up, panelists have shown up, and allies have shown up. When are you going to show up?
You'll only get movement on this issue and get our kids their constitutional rights, which they deserve, which they should have, if enough people scream, stand up, and say bloody murder. I've had enough. I've had enough. Enough of dysfunction.
These children in this city could go through 3 or 4 different superintendents and leadership tracks that roll out new plans. How do we expect to have any results with short-term planning?
She owns it. She should answer to it, and if she cannot come up with a reasonable response, she should be fired.
This city has reached a point of crisis. The murders, the violence, the poverty, the crime, the corruption, all of it has taken a toll. And many people trace that back to a struggling public school system that has produced generations of students who tell us they simply didn't get the education they needed to succeed.
Some of the students who are not being educated now will be some of the students who will be attending funerals for later on.
In 2021, Baltimore City schools dropped to an all-time low on a national assessment of student performance. Baltimore ranks second to last in the country among districts tested.
It's killing the lives of thousands of black kids, poor kids, across the board, black, white, or brown.
In 2021, Baltimore also ranked among America's most dangerous cities.
The school system is the primary of all of this. It's not the crime, it's the schools. The crime is directly related to the lack of education and the ability of people to be able to work at a job that will sustain them and their family.
What happened at Augusta Fells was not an isolated incident. Project Baltimore has been investigating the school system for nearly 5 years, and we've reported on just how dire the situation really is. COVID certainly made the situation worse, and the setbacks that we saw were just staggering.
That part of the story when we return. Stay with us. Back to our story. Baltimore City Schools is under attack from every single allegation that's being brought up by Project City Baltimore, which for 5 years they have been documenting every single issue that has been in the book, from grade tampering to everything. Now in the documentary, which you're still about to see, there's a lot more to it. Take a look.
If almost half of our kids are failing, what options do they have after high school? This is really disheartening. It's sad to see this.
41% of Baltimore City Public High School students earned below a 1.0 grade point average during the first 3 quarters of the 2020 school year. But the problems in Baltimore did not begin with the pandemic. In 2017, we found 6 Baltimore City schools with 0 students who tested proficient in math or English. Another 13 high schools had 0 students proficient in state math testing.
The real-life consequences of Baltimore City's struggling school system can be devastating, and we have seen that firsthand. We interviewed a man who was 66 years old, made it to high school in Baltimore City in the 1960s without learning one important skill. I hate to ask you this question and put you on the spot, but what does that sign say? Can you read that?
First 2 words I can read about Harvard City High School, home of the press. That's it.
Home of the...
Can't get the last word.
You don't know what that last word is?
No.
Pirates.
Pirates, okay. I could never get the syllables in school. Yeah, it's been tough.
Been tough?
Yeah, real tough. And when people know you can't read, they take advantage of you.
How did you survive?
It was hard. It was hard. It was hard.
We also met a 39-year-old single mother, Michelle Bradley, who said the same thing happened to her in the 1990s. She made it to high school without being able to read.
They failed me because if you're passing me, but you know I'm not getting this, then yes, I do blame. I blame them.
This is something that we hear often, that Baltimore City Schools is pushing kids through the school system, and in some cases, teachers have told us that they have been pressured to change failing grades to passing.
We have graduated kids who can't read.
Flat out can't read.
Flat out.
Illiterate.
Illiterate.
Getting a high school diploma.
Had a diploma in their hand that they couldn't read. That sounds like an exaggeration or hyperbole. It's not.
How did my son pass if he didn't know none of this math? They passed him. They just passed him along.
What was that text telling you to do?
Go into my grade book, make sure no students are failing, and essentially change the grades if they are failing so that they will pass with a 60%.
Feel as though they're setting him up for failure. What's the point of having passing and failing if you can fail every class and still pass?
like?
It's ridiculous. It's sad. You got smart and bright kids out here. These kids aren't, failing because they can't do it. They failing because they know they can. That's the difference.
With the community reeling from the findings at Augusta Fells, City Council decided to hold an investigative hearing, calling the school CEO to ask her questions. And Mackenzie, at this point, the community really felt like there was going to be some accountability.
Yeah, the public thought they would get some answers for some of these failures, but really it turned out to be the exact opposite. During that hearing, city schools attempted to discredit the reporting on Augusta Fells, most of which would later be confirmed, when the public also found out they would not be able to ask any questions or really direct those questions to the CEO of City Schools, Dr. Sonia Santelises, at all.
You cannot ask the school CEO no questions, but if you can send it, so, ma'am, that's the process. That's the
I'm
process.
asking the question. You can direct it to whomever. But understand, who are we asking to?
You can make comments, but no questions to the school
Well, then what is the purpose of
CEO.
hearing?
Okay, well,
So
that's the
that makes no
process.
sense. Just like the school board and all the administration makes no sense.
You ought to have your hands up and be screaming at this woman because she's failing our children.
That meeting in April ended with committee chairman Councilman Robert Stokes agreeing to bring back the city school CEO for another meeting to get even more answers. And I tried dozens of times to try and find out when that meeting would take place.
We're going to schedule her back. That's why I recessed it.
Okay.
It didn't go back out to the community. So we wanted to make sure we recessed it so we have another hearing. So we come back. Not yet, but we will have another hearing.
2 months ago you said you were going to schedule it, now you want to wait for the investigation to be over?
I want the investigation to be over.
Okay.
Yeah. I looked at it, I said that, but let's let the investigation go where it goes and then go from there.
3 months later, in September, the district released the explosive findings of its internal investigation. Councilman Stokes called another hearing. For more than 2 hours, no one asked a single question about Augusta Fells.
Given that those students in the grades have been a part of the culture here in Baltimore City since I was even a child, what are the steps that you're taking to change the culture? What are you doing as the CEO or the board to hold like principals, administrators, and teachers to integrity in reporting the attendance and the grades?
We have gone deep with allegations when they arise, and I think we have demonstrated that those folks, when they are found out, it sends the signal that it's not tolerated. We work with authorities when necessary to pursue those who deliberately come out to mislead the public, mislead families, and most importantly, to mislead children about their progress.
So Mackenzie, there was really only one question about Augusta Fells in an investigative city council hearing that was called because of Augusta Fells.
Exactly, Chris. And after that second hearing, we were left with even more questions, none of which, though, Mayor Brandon Scott or Councilman Robert Stokes were willing to answer.
You never mentioned then the report, the investigation that came out of Augusta Fells.
Well, the hearing actually wasn't about Augusta Fells. The hearing is more about school performance.
As chair, did you think it was important to bring that up? School performance, that does include grade changing.
Yeah, he brought it up.
But you didn't.
Well, because my focus, again, was school performance. That's what's my focus. And any other council people want to bring up about Augusta Fells, they had the opportunity.
Weeks after that hearing, we learned Augusta Fells was not the only school with ghost classes or ghost students. Another Baltimore City school, Claremont Middle High School, apparently had some of the same issues. And that's according to its former principal, who told us she had been watching our coverage of Augusta Fells. And for her, it seemed all too familiar.
I believe that it is happening at many schools.
Angel Lewis is currently suing Baltimore City Schools for wrongful termination. She claims North Avenue violated state whistleblower protection laws because when she got to Claremont in 2016, she began reporting what she found at the school under the previous principal, Kamala Carnes.
You had 5 dead students enrolled at your school.
At the time that I inherited the school, yes. several staff members, they actually went through the roster with me and let me know who had attended, who never attended, who was deceased. One of the teachers even mentioned to me that she attended the funeral.
When Lewis took over, she says 130 students were enrolled at the school, but only about 30 were attending. Ghost students, as they're called by educators, are only enrolled on paper.
Because I was the one who reported it and began to give attention to it, I then became the scapegoat. It's better to blame the new person.
City schools declined an interview, but said in a statement, in part, it is important to understand that the allegations in any legal complaint are tested through an extensive process to determine whether they can be proved true. This is the original lawsuit Lewis filed against city schools. It details how she issued complaints with the district that Claremont was cheating on the statewide assessment, graduating students that were not eligible to graduate, and had teachers not qualified to teach. Angel filed complaints stating the students were enrolled in classes that did not exist, saying Claremont's schedule did not include math or science courses, which are required to graduate.
These classes aren't listed. How are students in English 1 if English 2 isn't listed? Or how are they supposed to be in math and the math classes aren't there? And how is this working for science, because there are no science courses for me to work with the registrar to select with the students.
Did you have students at your school that got a high school diploma from Baltimore City Schools that didn't earn it?
I absolutely believe that. Prior to me being a principal, and quite frankly, unless something changed, probably is still going on it today.
All of this raises serious concerns about transparency in Baltimore City Schools, which has been an ongoing issue. In 2017, Fox 45 News had to sue the school system over the release of public documents. We had requested information about improper grade changing reports. We wanted to know how prevalent it was throughout the school system. But City Schools denied our request and gave us nothing. So we sued them. And after we sued them, they did start to release some information, some documents, including 106 pages that were completely redacted. We believe you have a right to see this report, but apparently in Baltimore City Public Schools, this is what transparency looks like. 106 pages, entirely redacted, every line, every word, blacked out.
Almost a year to get this, and this is what you got last week. This is kind of a poke in the eye and kind of a pretty obnoxious.
Lucy Dalglish is the Dean of Journalism at the University of Maryland. She is an expert in public records policy.
There are some states that really take public records very seriously, and there are some that just kind of blow them off. Maryland is kind of in the middle. Maryland requires that you show bad faith, and quite honestly, I don't think I've ever seen bad faith more obvious. I mean, this is Exhibit A.
The public records lawsuit against Baltimore City Schools went to trial in February 2019. Circuit Court Judge Jeannie Hong heard 10 hours of testimony. In March, she issued her ruling, finding city schools willfully and knowingly violated the law by refusing to release the documents.
Knowingly and willfully violated the law. I thought, first of all, it didn't come as a shock to me.
Judge Hong ordered city schools to turn over all documents and reimburse our legal fees of nearly $200,000. Following the ruling, Maryland's governor and lieutenant governor sat down with Project Baltimore.
The arrogance of some of these school systems to say, we don't care, we don't have to answer your questions, and we don't have to provide you information. It's outrageous.
Accountability is key. You know, they're not accountable to any elected official, and they should be.
You hear teachers say, we've got to reach into our pockets to pay for school supplies. Or when you hear parents saying our kids are freezing or sweating in the classroom, those are real problems. But it's not because they're not getting billions of dollars in funding. It's because of incompetence and mismanagement and complete lack of accountability and the wasting of money.
In 2019, 3 months after the ruling, Baltimore City Schools revised its grade-changing policy.
After we win the lawsuit, we start receiving information from Baltimore City Schools, including thousands of emails sent by school employees about grade changing. And as we were reading through them, we found cases of failing grades being rounded up to passing, students being promoted even when they don't show up to class, teachers fighting back after being pressured to change grades. We also had an email from a city school's assistant principal who said their children suffer from learned helplessness. We showed that email to a former city teacher.
You said the problem. You said what the problem was. We've promoted them up until now, and now we're going to hold them accountable. But you have to understand they have learned helplessness, so you might want to change the grade. Make up your mind.
In October 2021, 3 Republican state delegates authored an op-ed in the Baltimore Sun. The lawmakers wrote, "The level of fraud in Baltimore City schools is like a cancer. It has metastasized almost completely unchecked for decades."
You're blaming the legislature.
I think that they're complicit in what is going on by the work that you have done, and certainly the work that the Inspector General's office has discovered. We have kids that are being counted and then not showing up for class. We have the ghost students. We're spending millions of dollars to educate kids that aren't there.
Maryland schools get about $15,000 per student enrolled. Baltimore City gets a little more, making it the 5th most funded large school system in America. But from this investigation, we analyzed state data, and we found a lot of that money is going to educate students who are labeled whereabouts unknown. In other words, they can't be found. But the school is still getting the money to educate that child. And it's a lot.
The fact that we're funding students whose whereabouts are unknown, and not a small number, thousands, and it adds up to tens of millions of dollars, that's something that needs to be looked at.
In 2019, 40 students at Augusta Fells were labeled whereabouts unknown. Throughout the entire state, it was 6,126 students. Taxpayers spent nearly $93 million in 1 year to educate students who could not be found.
So you think it does make more sense to fund schools based off attendance than this 1 day a year enrollment on September 30th?
Yes, I do agree with that.
Maryland's comptroller and Democratic candidate for governor is calling for the state to change how public schools are funded.
It's a very simple solution. Instead of taking one tally at September 30th to see who's in school and who's out of school, they need to do it monthly. It's unacceptable for taxpayers' money to go for students that are knowingly not in the school system.
In the 2021 session, Maryland's legislature passed a massive education funding increase known as the Kirwan Plan. But Mackenzie, many people's concern is that additional money may not help if there also isn't additional accountability and transparency.
Yeah, Chris, the Office of Inspector General for Education was created for that very purpose and that very reason, but it went from an expected office of 7 down to a staff of 3, and those 3 people are responsible for the entire state of Maryland.
On top of that, you also have a very large, very powerful teachers union that is involved.
Yeah, and critics say that the teachers union are opposed to competition to programs and institutions like charter schools or other programs that would allow students to go to private schools using public dollars.
But the money is being attached to them. More of this documentary when we come back. Returning to our story. The Failing Project, we'll turn to our Failing Project documentary. So far we looked at is the grading policies, teachers being fired, and the lawsuits being won. Now it's all about the Thornton Plan. What is it? Let's take a look.
20 years.
Students to go to private schools using public dollars.
Nearly 20 years before Kirwan, Maryland passed similar legislation called Thornton. At that time, it was the largest increase in education funding in Maryland's history. But more money did not create better results. Graduation rates and state test scores compared to the national average stayed about the same.
But if we're just throwing more money at the problem and we don't go back to the very basic root of all of these problems, we're not going to get anywhere. Someone else will be sitting here with you in 10, 15 years, and you'll be having the exact same conversation if we don't go back and fix the problem first.
For 7 years in a row, Baltimore City has recorded more than 300 murders. 2021 closed with 337 murders.
For you, that 15-year-old that was killed yesterday, this is for you. Enough is enough. Enough is enough.
What grade would you give them? F. Do for us what you want done for you and your children. Don't forget.
Baltimore City's population has dropped to 585,000, the lowest in 110 years. People are leaving.
Well, I'm from Baltimore, born and raised. I have 3 deceased baby fathers, all of them gone. One got killed in 1993. Another one was murdered in 2004, and then my girl's father was murdered in 2015. I come from a family of destruction, and I'm trying to break the cycle.
Patrice Lunt's 17-year-old son is a Baltimore City student. He is the youngest of her 3 boys. In 2020, he was arrested in connection with an armed robbery.
I'm trying to tell my son, you don't want to go that road, It's not the road you want to go.
Are you worried that your son's not going to graduate?
Yes, I am.
In 2021, 28 people under the age of 20 were killed in Baltimore.
I'm not going to give up on him. I don't want him to end up like his brothers who are statistics to Baltimore.
Your 2 older sons are in jail?
Yes. They look to the streets because they feel like they have no other way to go. I don't want to bury my children in the streets of Baltimore. I don't want them killed in the streets of Baltimore.
Project Baltimore has been investigating the public school system for nearly 5 years, and in that time, we have learned the problems run generations deep. Many believe the system is broken, and the failures in the school system eventually reach the streets.
And really, the taxpayers, the parents, and ultimately the kids are the ones paying the ultimate price in this. And the community, Chris, has reached such a crisis point with the crime growing out of control. They're essentially begging city leaders to save the city, but no one is taking responsibility. Not the mayor, not the city council, or even the Baltimore School Board.
You are the ones who can make the difference, which is why Project Baltimore and Fox 45 News are committed to telling your stories. This is just the beginning. We're going to continue to hold public officials accountable for the future of this city. I'm Chris Pabst.
And I'm Mackenzie Frost.
Thank you for watching this Project Baltimore special.
Some final thoughts about what we talked about when we come back. Please stay with us. Baltimore has been one of the few cities that has been trying to turn its face around, but going back to what Chris has talked about, those little black borders, black blank page that we saw, it'd be like, let me show you one more time.
6 pages that were completely redacted. We believe you have a right to see this report, but apparently in Baltimore City Public Schools, this is what transparency looks like. 106 pages,
106
entirely
pages.
redacted. Every line, every word, blacked out.
Almost a year to get this, and this is what you got last week. This is kind of a...
I mean, you know what would be like this? Oh, they think we're gonna give them this, huh? Let's black it all out. Let's slap the black ink on it. This one. Oh, you think you're gonna expose us? That report? Aaron, take that shit to the station. Let them report it on it. Ooh, it smells like shit. And then they be fighting back, wiping their asses too. If I was there and I saw what happened, I'd just shit on the school. I just pull my pants down and just shit. Yeah. And then wipe my ass with my cap and gown. Ugh. Ugh. Now, I'm not trying to be disgusting here, but you probably get the picture here. Little black borders. Oh, you want to talk about us, eh? Well, here's what we're going to do. Well, here's what you did do, you freaking jerks. You have violated state law. Violated state law.
A poke in the eye and kind of a pretty obnoxious.
Lucy Dalglish is the Dean of Journalism at the University of Maryland. She is an expert in public records policy.
There are some states that really take public records very seriously, and there are some that just kind of blow them off. Maryland is kind of in the middle. Maryland requires that you show bad faith, and quite honestly, I don't think I've ever seen bad faith more obvious than this is Exhibit A.
The public records lawsuit against Baltimore City Schools went to trial in February 2019.
That was 5 years
Circuit
ago.
Court Judge Jeannie Hong heard 10 hours of testimony. In March, she issued her ruling, finding city schools willfully and knowingly violated the law by refusing to release the documents.
Oh, we're going to release his documents. Oh, here's what we're going to do. We don't care. We're not going to care about everybody. We're going to do what we're going to do. We don't care what everybody says. If they don't like it, get the fuck out of my city. I don't give a shit. That's always everyone's attitude. We don't care. We don't give a shit. You don't like it? Get the fuck out of here. We don't care. We don't care. Nobody cares. And people in Baltimore out there, I feel you. I know. When someone says they don't care, they don't care. Keep sharing your stories. I want to hear your stories. I want this to be talked about on our next special series, Crisis in the Classroom, Project Baltimore. And someday, we're going to have Chris Papps and Mackenzie Frost come on this broadcast as experts. They know less than I know. We're putting education back on the map. And when we first talked about this, it's like, this would take the cake. Violating state laws, not caring, and spending a lot of money, a lot of our tax dollars. So why would they even violate state law? Why would they even just say, we're not going to answer your questions, but you can make comments to answer your questions? It's like some sort of fucking joke. Like, what if you were to ask a question and you want to get a straight up answer? It's a fucking insult. This should have been handled. But instead, it's worthless. It's not as worthless as these fucking Ted Lasso socks I got from a friend of mine. Not as worthless. These are good socks. $5 from a friend of mine. But they have violated the law. Very. Take the law very seriously. If the public feels like the schools are violating the law, you have the right to sue them and defend yourself. You shouldn't be changing grades. If they're in jail, you expel them. You automatically expel them. Juvenile detention centers. You don't just sit there and pass them on to the next class and put pressure on them. Come on, get real. And for those that want to sit there and just sulk and not care, well, you all need to resign. Resign. Or be trained. You can blame the school system for students who have not earned the grades. However, I don't think you can blame the teachers for underperforming students. Like, if you're at 60%, that's an F. 70 is a C, 80 is a B, 90 is an A. 60%, dad go to summer school. And when Trump called him out, he was a lot of criticism. What's done in the dark or what's comes out in the light. It's a cycle that continues, you know? Nobody cares. It's like, send them on to the next class. I mean, think about No Child Left Behind. Send them on to the next class. They don't care. They really do not care. And it gets even worse, you know? It's one of the best ever. But here's a story that you'll see coming up on Game Break Wednesday. Registered and enrolled. This is also a special page from Project Baltimore. All of this was this was during the pandemic. You're about to see what happens, and you know, there's a lot of stuff needs to get done, so we'll keep following these stories from Project Baltimore, and we'll give you the very latest of what's been going on, so really hope it will help out some people. So that will be on a future Give Me a Break. Alright. Do you remember Amy's Baking Company? If you watch Kitchen Nightmares, remember Amy's Baking Company, or ABC. They were on Kitchen Nightmares. And you might have seen them, responding to the online bullies and all. But on tonight's Bible Break, this had happened. There was a knife attack attempted by this person. This is footage you probably have not seen. Take a look.
Of Sammy screaming at a customer holding what looked like a knife, and Amy had to restrain Sammy.
It's not worth it. Hey, you're gonna go to jail for the rest of your life. Think about what you're doing.
And it was reported at the time that Sammy had tried to stab a customer with a knife. However, in an interview that the couple did later, Sammy said that what he was holding was not a knife, and in fact, it was just a silver-coloured pen. According to Amy and Sammy, 2 men and a woman came into the restaurant, and one of the men was drunk and started yelling. And when Sammy asked them to leave because they were drunk, the 2 men started yelling, and apparently one of the men tried to touch Amy. And this is what led to Sammy yelling at the man, and then what we saw in the video. When footage...
Wow. When was this?
Hate seeing ads. Here's how to get rid of them, or get paid to see them.
Do you know how much of the content you see on a daily basis are actually ads? That's an ad. That's an ad. Yep.
Wow. You probably know about this one, but you choose behavior, choose consequences. Well, you know the pen is wider than the sword. Let's get ready for Monday. Going into Tuesday. Concentration, not strength. Stop bullying, speak up. No jaywalking. I'll see you on Wednesday.